from across the Near East attest to the importance of Carchemish. There we go. Hey, there we go. Okay, we're over here now. Let's go. We were just over here before to where it's taken itself. So this is the area of the Middle Euphrates Valley, which I'm going to be talking about now. So this is a region which is traditionally considered rather peripheral to discussions of population displacement in the Late Bronze Age. I would argue personally that's more of a product of scholarship, our respective disciplines where we're trained either in Aegean archaeology or Near Eastern archaeology. So what I'm going to propose today is a scenario based on textual evidence and archaeological evidence, which I think should shift our balance a bit when we're thinking about these population displacements. During the period 1350 to 1175 BC, Carchemish was the principal centre of Hittite authority outside Anatolia. During the LBA too, it really is best considered, I think, as another Hittite capital. When we read a lot of Hittite texts about what's going on in the Levant and here, particularly down in Euphrates and this, that, and the other, and perhaps even in Cyprus as well, right at the very end, what we're actually hearing about is the Hittites working through their proxy in Carchemish. So it's, whereas Koi is up here, we also need to think about these Hittites as well. So between 2006 and 2010, I was involved in a project called the Land of Carchemish project, which was, again, very nice to hear shout out to Tony for running these workshops. Worked with a lovely man, Tony Wilkinson, who's very sadly not with us, and we did a survey of this area here. So from the Sajur up to the modern Turkish-Syrian border. So we were looking at the immediate hinterland of Carchemish. It was a multi-period survey. One of the periods which went particularly well was the Late Bronze and, to a lesser extent, the Early Iron Age. So as part of this work, what I've tried to do was situate our survey results from that relatively small region within the broader landscape context of the Middle Euphrates Valley. This was done by integrating all available survey data from legacy studies into a single GIS for that whole region, and that was to facilitate large-scale analysis of settlement patterns. What I think we've also picked up during the course of doing that is certain structural features which can be related to mass deportation events. So that's what I'm going to be concentrating on today. So this is a map here showing, so Carchemish, this is our land of Carchemish area here. This is the Euphrates River running over there, not down there. And this is just this is not all of them. I think we pulled data from about 14 different surveys altogether. So there's a whole variety of surveys, some of which can be regarded as intensive surveys, some of which are very broad, there are reconnaissance surveys only, but all of them, there's a Bleak survey there, that's a very good survey, wonderful there, Carl Conway's work there, down on the Euphrates. So we were able to pretty much cover most of the Middle Euphrates Valley in one way or another with various types of survey work. And basically the point of that was to extrapolate data on Late Bronze Age settlement. Now, one of the problems with this is the resolution of the data which we're able to work with. Some of the more modern surveys, such as around the time of Carchemish stuff and some of the things from around the Big Bend, the typology is sufficiently well advanced that we were able to give a pretty good date. So we can narrow it down to Late Bronze Age 2, which is the period we should be looking at. For some things, when you went back and looked at it, realistically, you could say it was a Late Bronze Age type, but you couldn't reliably distinguish between Late Bronze Age 1 and Late Bronze Age 2. So what you're looking at here is really a palimpsest of, this is the best guess of what your Late Bronze Age survey, Late Bronze Age 2 settlement environment looked like, but in practice we need to accept that there's a degree of imprecision in it. Probably the least imprecise are the ones up here. These are Charles Burney's sites from the 50s, which were again once again in the 70s, but these are small settlements up here, up in the hills, so they're not really impacting on this large urban stuff, which is perhaps the most important stuff. A lot of the data comes from salvage excavations as well. So just going over this so you realise the nature of the data we're dealing with. A lot of this stuff was done awfully quickly. Several dams on both sides of the border have gone in from the 70s onwards. A lot of the excavations delivered a fantastically rich data set, but this stuff was done very quickly. So again, we're looking at a very partial picture of what Late Bronze Age settlement in this region looks like. But nonetheless, it is, it does enable us to come up with sort of a reasonable approximation, I think. So in terms of site sizes, which are shown on this map, these are derived wherever possible from the original survey and excavation reports, based on, hopefully, colleagues know these things best for their own areas. Where we weren't particularly convinced, for whatever reason, about the size of the settlement, an issue of definition or whatever, we went back and looked at everything with corona imagery. So we tried to work out the extent of settlement based on that as well. Most of them tied up very well. An obvious exception would be when you looked at EMAR, when they calculated the site size for that, the original estimates of very large, about 70 hectares, were based on the entire settlement, including outlying field systems and things. So when we went and looked back at the actual size of the town, the lower towns, as along the coronas, we ended up putting that guy down to about 35, which matches much better with the overall landscape. So it looks at it. So, when we're trying to relate this to what can be regarded as sort of proto-historic circumstances, due to the resolution of the survey data available, the excavation data, which only allows us this broad approximation of LBA2, it's necessary and desirable, I think, to also work with textual sources as well and try and draw a correlation between the two. This gives us maybe a degree of, I think, false chronological accuracy in numerous instances. We're relating data sets of two different types, where each have their own chronological imprecisions. To that you can add on geomorphological data as well, with its own issues of dating. But when you relate the two things, there are numerous instances in the Middle Euphrates Valley when you can start to draw correlations. And this is the basis of relating things to mass deportation events. So, to sort of show you the methodology and the type of things which you can do with this data, we've got this this quote here from, this is from Schubler-Lummer, this is from the Bridge Annals, and it's an example of mass deportation which is claimed for the Middle Euphrates Valley. So, part of this is to take these claims of mass deportation from this region, which are going both east and west, the Hittites are pulling people out, and the Assyrians are pulling people out the other way, and to say, is this practical based on the evidence we have of the settlement? So, what we do, we look at this, we have the number there, so we know that they're leaving the upper citadel intact, and then they're taking people from the bottom. So, how does that line up with actually what we've got in terms of the data from survey and also the coronas? So, the citadel, 4 hectares, that's great, that's about the right size. Inner town, 40 hectares. This is the city wall that's been dated, so that's the Lake Frontage city wall there, around the outside. So what we have here is an equation. So we can do a little bit of basic maths based on estimating population densities. So we can say, is this possible? And the answer with this one is yes, we can have the figure. So if we say this is a usual thing for estimating site sizes in there is 100 to 200 persons per hectare. 40 to 80% of the city's inhabitants, if it just came from the lower town, could have been deported. That fits quite nicely with what we know about these things. Does it work with, if we go back to the settlement map, well, that's entirely possible. One of the interesting features we have as well for the ABA2, and these are dated pretty well, because these are all ones from the recent work on the Island of Carchemish survey. We start to get these very structural features coming into the landscape of these irregularly spaced sites, which are not present in LBA1, in LBA2. So we can take that, another way of interpreting that, that claim of mass deportation is to take the hinterland of Carchemish as well. So we can actually run the numbers in a slightly different way, and we can say that, yes, absolutely. So that there is evidence for abrupt changes in settlement which correlates with a claimed mass deportation event. So that's really the best you can do with this stuff in terms of sort of chronological resolution. So we have a mass deportation claim and a structural relationship, quite possibly, with this little area here, which we associate with Hittite agency. Now, when we started looking at other structural features in the valley, we started thinking, oh well, we've got these rather different settlement patterns in different areas. So we've got this very structured landscape here, which is directly associated with Carchemish. When we go above the Enesh Gorge there, we have this very different landscape up here. It's a rather depopulated landscape. And this is on the frontier between the Hittite sphere of influence coming down from Lachia there, and the Mitanni sphere of influence on here. So this is actually the nearest frontier region for Hittite campaigns coming down, facing the kingdom of Heidelberg, the kingdom of Mitanni. So we've got a frontier region which looks rather depopulated. Again, the association with specific claims of deportation are not normally as specific as that, so you can't draw a direct correlation. But nonetheless, we have a contested frontier region we know is going back and forth over and over again. We have a distinct settlement pattern in that region of depopulation relative to other areas. Now, I've completely lost where we were on the script, I'm afraid, so just I think I'll just continue on in that vein. Well, I think the most interesting one in this region for looking at issues of mass deportation is this is one version of it. There's two Assyrian claims by Colloque which is at exactly the right time for this end of the Late Bronze Age collapse of Carchemish things, for a large-scale deportation of people from 28,800 people from Syria. So when he's talking about Hittite people from Syria, what he's actually talking about was in the remit of Carchemish. Now, we do know that the Assyrians are campaigning, so this area here is under Assyrian control. They are campaigning right up into this area. So we started looking at this, right, well, I think this was always presumed to be propaganda. So these Assyrian claims regarding, particularly when you get into the near Assyrian claim period, these claims are absolutely huge. They talk about deporting hundreds of thousands of people. So these claims are undoubtedly a mixture of claims which are based on reality and purely propaganda statements, where people are conflating things from previous rulers, etc., etc. So it's aggrandizing. But the premise was, could this potentially be accurate again, once we noticed this interesting relationship with Carchemish? So, 28,800. We took this area here, which is the land of Astarte. So this is a well-attested single geopolitical entity. And we looked at the collective settlement sizes of all these settlements using that equation again of 100 to 200 people per hectare. Now, this is where I need the numbers from maths. So, the main casualty in the Euphrates Valley of the settlement disruptions that characterised the end of the Late Bronze Age was undoubtedly the land of Astarte. All the region's major urban centres were abandoned. So all these very large sites here, all coming up about sort of anything from 25 to 30 hectares, which are big for Late Bronze Age sites in this part of the world. And all of them display, with the exception of just one or two over there, evidence for burning. So we've got destruction horizons there, we've got conflagration going on. This cataclysm contrasts with the situation immediately prior, when the construction of the Bazi West Stack, so that's another one of these very large sites on this side here, shows it's a very prosperous region. There's expansion going on. That's a Hittite period settlement where they've extended by about 8 hectares, I think, the entire settlement. So we've got a very, very densely populated urban area. I wouldn't like to say exactly how that compares with other bits of the event, but it's certainly up there as one of the most densely populated regions in the Eastern Mediterranean Near East at this time. When considering the fate of Astarte and possible culprits for its demise, we have this repeated claim by the Syrian king Colloque, whose reign is 1233 to 1197 BC, to have deported 28,800 from west of the Euphrates back to the shore. We've also got Syrian incursions claimed at the end of the 13th century BC from the Assyrian kingdom of Heidelberg coming in there. So what we need to think about as well is when we're hearing these claims of a Hittite versus Assyrian conflict, what we probably have is actually a devolved conflict which goes up the chain later on. So we have localized skirmishes which involve attacking this region, and then we have the sort of cherry on the cake, this massive claim here. So what we've got is a signed confession, really. We've got a direct correlation between deporting people, 28,000. When you work it out on the numbers, it actually works out you can take those 28,800 deportees, equates, if every site in this region is abandoned at the same time, which the archaeology is telling us it is, it equates to 239 persons per hectare. That's a little bit higher than we would want if we were drawing a direct link between the two, but it is within the realm of possibility for Assyrian sites we have further east. And also, crucially, when you look at this landscape, you have to consider, are we looking at a complete settlement landscape as well? And when we started looking down on the floodplain a bit as well, this is something Tony did a lot of work over many years, there is an awful lot of alluviation which we know is covering settlement on the floodplain as well. So once you take into account some settlements down there as well, you actually get that population ratio down towards the 200s, which you would want for it to be a realistic correlation. So what we've got is a claim, and apparently an archaeological correlation for that many people moving abruptly within a space of about 25-30 years, which we can do in the chronology. So what happens afterwards? So we only have one settlement left, which is over here, where we have continued, so this is after 1200 BC, or thereabouts. We only have one settlement here which is left, with proper Iron Age 1 occupation attested. And these little blue dots here are indications of continuing respecting of land tenure. So what we have is some Iron Age pottery respecting pre-existing field boundaries in the landscape. So what we think is going on is there was always a sort of transhumanist relationship between these urban sites here and what's going on down in the desert up here. We think this might be people to continuing respecting pre-existing land tenure arrangements around an urban site, even though most of the urban landscape is gone, but there's no reason to think that relationship broke down. So when we came up with this, we started thinking, well, all right, could it be any other region? Now, we know Carchemish has got this very structured landscape, and we know in the early Iron Age 1, Carchemish at least continued. There's not actually too much disruption at Carchemish across the Bronze to Iron Age transition. We now know that from the settlements that are around here. This region's already depopulated. There's no way you can account for this 28,800. So this really actually, when you narrow it down, is the only candidate we've got within Hittite Syria for this large-scale deportation. So I will talk about this in a minute. So what I attempted to do when I went back to this work after Professor Tony passed away, was I tried then to follow in my head, where, all right, if the Assyrians are taking these people here, if this idea is correct, is it possible to follow them on their journey from origin to destination? So that's what I will look at now. So that's the premise, if you will. Unfortunately, we don't have nearly as many records for the Assyrian period, the Middle Assyrian period, when we've got this claimed deportation by difficulty in Inurtu. When compared to the Near Assyrian period, we have to go several hundred years into the future to get really detailed Assyrian records, which are iconographic, which are lots and lots more documentary sources regarding the nature of the mass deportation process itself. And it's important to sort of think about what the Assyrians were doing when they were moving people from areas on the periphery of their control to other areas within the empire. We're used to seeing, we'll have another discussion about terminology again today, but we're used to seeing refugees, migrants, really from a reception point of view, as a burden to either be avoided or a burden to be sort of shouldered, right? People are not generally considered to be a resource in any way, shape or form. That's a paradigm that simply doesn't apply to the ancient world, I don't think. I don't think it's really accurate for us to sort of draw such a precise comparison. The Assyrians were completely reliant on deporting populations in order to feed the economic system which they set up within the empire. They essentially had a problem of population, I suppose, I don't know what you say, inflationary pressure going on. Their economy was reliant on continued expansion, and I think you can make this argument for the Middle Assyrian period as well as the Neo-Assyrian, where they had to go into new areas. They were undertaking large irrigation projects. They were bringing in populations to, for the first time, put land into cultivatable use. All right? They needed population. It wasn't an option for them, once they started this cycle, to sustain their economic model without kidnapping lots of people around. Now, what does this mean in terms of understanding the journey of these people who have been deported? Moving. Well, you have to think of it in rather brutal terms, to be honest with you, but the Assyrians saw these people as economic assets. So, they did value them in a way that I think refugee populations are not perceived today. So, this is the sort of the bit really where we have no archaeological evidence for, as far as I'm aware anyway, of the process of deportation and moving people across. We have, for the Middle Assyrian period anyway, we have very, very little written evidence at all about what was involved with actually looking after these people, and the logistics of moving these people across fairly large distances. So we really need to look at sort of modern data to try and get any sort of grip on what might be going on here. If you're deporting 28,000 people, I don't really think there's much point in seeing it from an individual point of view, an experiential point of view. I think the nearest you're going to get to reality is looking at it from a sort of a public health point of view. You're moving a large body of population, you need to sustain these people, you've got to put in place a very large logistical mechanism with the Assyrian army, itself made up of people on the large part who've been previously deported, in order to take care of these people and move them around. So just, sorry, I did forget to mention something here. It's important on these reliefs to actually look at the demographic structure as well of who we're moving over. We know that the Assyrians, when possible, did like to move people in family units. There are several texts from the later period talking about how they valued the sort of stability of the population. There's even accounts of, it's very difficult to sort of fathom in your head, but the Assyrians, will order the killing of, 2/5 of the population in a city, and then they go to huge pains to sort out marriage dowries for the remaining people because they want them to integrate and sort of be economically functional at the other end. It really is a sort of brutal paternalism in some respects, the way the Assyrians dealt with people. But if we look at the journey of moving people across from a public health perspective, you can start to sort of look at what's going on with these people. So we've got the issue of physical health. These people need water, they need food. When you move people en masse, often coming from a conflict situation, there's an issue of sort of, endemic diseases spreading throughout these people's populations. There's also an issue of mental health. A lot of people have been through extremely traumatic events. We have the very graphic accounts, unfortunately, really, of the Syrian warfare, where there were, deportations, setting people's heads on fire, firing the heads back over the ramparts. That was pretty brutal stuff, flaying, all sorts of things. Social dislocations. You're talking about transplanting a population which is, in the land of Astarta, if that was actually what happened there, that was a tradition of urbanism going back 2,000 years. And then it was snuffed out within about sort of, we can probably put it down to a few years, maybe about 10 years. It's quite remarkable. So you're moving culturally homogenous groups, and you're moving them to completely different places, into different modes of living and things like that. And then there's the physical process of resettlement as well, which is beginning with 28,000 people is a real issue. So just to run over these reasonably quickly, I know I'm going over slightly. Syrian and Hittite capitals as well. We believe the Hittites are doing this as well. We know very little about that from textual sources, but we think it was a two-way thing from the Euphrates Valley. They're viewed as economic assets. These people are being moved for specific reasons. We're even dividing people down sometimes based on what they did in terms of their skill set, pottery producing, things like that. So there's a real sort of brutal pragmatism to this. Moving people over, there were campaigning seasons which the Assyrian army used. Sometimes they were optimized for deportation. What's better weather in which to kidnap large amounts of people? All right, it's pretty horrendous stuff, but you have to think about these things because you don't want to be marching a bunch of people through mud because your precious economic assets are not going to be too well when they get to the other end. And this is the property of the king. One of the things I love doing textual stuff in here is the hand of Nurgle. All right, which is the hand of Nurgle is always described, it's the disease, all right? So the hand of Nurgle comes upon my land. And the lovely thing about the hand of Nurgle, it starts getting used as an excuse more and more as well. So towards the end of the day, Bronze says, sorry, I can't send you any grain, Nurgle. And you just quote Nurgle and you're fine. You don't need to sort of come up with songs and things like that. And of course, there is a relationship between people who've been through en masse through these traumatic events. And dealing with that, what does that mean in terms of the wider, the sort of physical state of the population moving over? So I don't want to dwell on this at all. There's a lot of literature about the mental health effects for a population as a whole. of going through these, traumatic conflicts events and then being deported en masse. There is a specific profile which, when you have a big enough population, you can see in, I think, just about every instance, where different groups within that will respond better. Generally speaking, the male population will be subject to slightly differential pressures because they're more likely to be involved in fighting. Young children are likely to be more susceptible to trauma in certain respects. Old people, obviously, more likely to cope less well with acculturation when they're being put into a mixed population at the other end. One specific thing for the Assyrians, which is interesting, is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. There's an article very interesting one a couple of years ago that came out in a medical journal, and these guys are both clinical psychologists. They think they found the earliest evidence of PTSD, and it's actually from an Assyrian source. There are previously several examples which cropped up in Greek sources to do with the wars of Sparta and this, that, and the other. What we've probably got here is actually somebody who's been involved in fighting in the Assyrian army, and he's experiencing full-on post-traumatic stress disorder, hallucinations, this, that, and the other. This was to do with the Assyrian army, but somebody mentioned this yesterday. There's not, when you're looking at the distinction between army and civilian populations, it doesn't really work in a lot of these Near Eastern contexts because they don't have professional armies. What they have is rolling conscription. So we know that the Assyrians have people who are on 1 year, you're in the army, next year you've got off, you're supposed to be concentrating on agricultural productivity, and the third year was negotiable, but more often than not they were trying to run the 3-year rotation. In the Assyrian period, we think that's also going on in the Middle Assyrian period. With the Hittite army as well, we know campaigning was sometimes timed to deal with harvests. You can't have your entire labour population leaving the fields to go fallow because everybody's off fighting. You need those food resources to come in. So I would personally say I don't think you can really sort of draw a distinction between what's happening to the fighting population and what's happening to the wider population as well. So social dislocation, again, this is something that's happening. Because we know the Assyrians are moving people in family units, this might not have been as bad as it could be in a lot of modern situations. It's likely that people were being moved with a large chunk of their community intact. So you can see some sort of transference of social relationships from origin to destination. It's very difficult to prove that. You can't really see people in destinations. I haven't found any examples yet where you can identify people saying, right, these are the guys coming from here, they're there. There does seem to be some sort of, archaeology just doesn't seem to work very well for this. We don't really seem to pick up much of a clear material signature in these big urban relocation projects. One interesting thing, which I think might be coming up, and again, this is sort of speculating in an absence of evidence, is we know that the Assyrians would routinely knock out a proportion of the population, and that would have been the male fighting population. So you would have had some sort of systemic imbalance going on in terms of what was happening to the demographic when people have been incorporated into the Assyrian Empire. We've also got this indirectly as well, where the Assyrian kings are coming out and saying, oh, we need to arrange marriage dowries so these people settle down at the other end. We might be seeing some sort of disruption of gender roles between origin and destination populations, which could be quite interesting. From something like David Sloane's work, The House of the Fatherless Factor Symbol of Ugarit, there is quite a lot of good evidence to suggest that the family units in the late Bronze Age in the East anyway were probably quite patriarchal. It was based on sort of a male progenitor, and all economic function was based around that. So there is the potential there for quite a lot of disruption if you're knocking out a significant chunk of the male population. Quite what that means in practice we don't know, because it's sectors of the economy where you're not really seeing much in terms of sort of gender archaeology. Now, to go back to where this is the end of the train of thought, if you like, where could these people have been going? If you're kidnapping 28,800 people, where are they going to go? Well, we know that happened at the beginning of, well, if it's real, it happened at the beginning of Tukulti-Ninurta's reign. Luckily, around the same time, so we were here in the Great Plain of the Euphrates, we're now over here at Tukulti-Ninurta. There is a large purpose-built settlement which pops up at exactly the right time, which was, we know from textual records, settled with people deported from other parts of the empire. It might not have been the sole destination of people there, but it's the best candidate we've got in terms of timing. It's literally been about 5 years, exactly the right time, these guys coming over. So this is the best guess about where most of these people, along with some other people from up here, ended up. So, what do we know about Carlskulting and Nertu? Unfortunately, not a lot. The only official buildings that have been excavated are sort of iconic things like houses. We know next to nothing at all about the domestic quarters. In terms of material signalling, which you might hope to see at the other end, we have a straight transition from an indigenous pottery tradition there to set Assyrian pottery types here. There is no relationship whatsoever. So if they are coming over, they're learning to pot in different ways straight away. Probably that's telling you something about the nature of the Assyrian state, I think, not about who's doing the potting. So really, that's as far as it went. In terms of using modern data again, this is really just sort of, I was trying to think about what would that be like if you've got different people coming in from different areas moving into a settlement, because there's logistics, you know, people are arriving on boats in waves, there's other things going on up in Babylonia, so people are moving in. This is a map which is of the Al-Zatari refugee camp from a couple of years ago now, up in Jordan. It's a very large refugee camp, and it was interesting just for purposes of this, because it filled up very quickly. There were several pulses of people who were coming over the border from areas of Syria, and what they did here, and this fantastic work these guys are doing with the REACH project, of providing logistical maps in refugee camps for allow sort of basic infrastructure planning. So these maps are then turned around the use of like things like putting in water resources, where to put the toilets, things like that. So this is GIS work that's very useful and applicable stuff. What they did, they went around and just recorded where people were coming from different parts of neighbouring areas of Syria. And what you can see is actually based on people arriving more or less spontaneously up to the border than the Jordanians were following people. You're actually seeing like quite distinct structural features in the landscape of the settlement landscape within the camp itself. So much like Carlskulting and Nertu, we've got something laid out in the grid system, and we've got neighbourhoods building up. Some of these neighbourhoods are based on where people are from. I'm told anecdotally that what happened a little bit later on, actually, some of these neighbourhoods started shifting around as it became a more stable community, and you actually got changes in settlement. But there are ways in which you can sort of start to think about how somewhere like Carlskulting and Nertu would have filled up. So, the main thing I would like to sort of stress here is that the role of state-level agency in looking at mass displacement events is very important. When you think about sea peoples, when we think about displacements in the Eastern Mediterranean, which is the directly adjacent area, also under Hittite control for a lot of it as well, so it's one of these big territorial empires exercising itself over the landscape, we tend to think about population displacement at the end of the Late Bronze Age as a stateless phenomenon. People moving around outside the confines of the state. What I would propose here is that actually what's going on in the middle Euphrates Valley, if that is what's going on there, although settlement abandons can be associated with the 28,000 people being pulled down, that's proportionally the biggest disruption of population, proportionally the biggest movement of population in that combined Eastern Mediterranean Near Eastern area. And it's happening with a signed confession from state-level agency. So what I would like, but I've got all these interesting people in the room, I would genuinely like if we could talk a little bit about that equation between state-level agency versus independent agency. So I think that's an interesting topic which might have been a bit imbalanced from this one. And I apologise that was a bit rambly, but I completely lost the speech there. So thank you very much for listening.